and welcome to Dice vs Cards. Today we're looking at Aeon's End, a 1 to 4 player cooperative deck building game where you start with a specific set of cards and you're looking to upgrade your deck as you go. It also has elements of variable player power because each of the characters you can choose from have their own strengths and weaknesses, and hand management because the cards you have on each turn need to be used in the most efficient manner possible. So you play as breach mages, looking to protect your home, the Gravehold, from the Nameless, a demon-like culture that probably just need a bloody good lesson in morality and a nice hefty fireball to the face. So let's see how this plays and whether this could be the next game for you. So the object of the game is for you as a team to defeat the Nemesis by reducing its health to 0 or by exhausting the Nemesis deck, and these are the encounter cards that you'll come across throughout the game, before they're able to exhaust all of your character cards or reduce your Gravehold's life total to 0. To set up, each player needs to bring their own character board with 10 life and a player turn order number. This board will also show you the starting hand of cards and the remaining cards in that deck that you'll draw on future turns. You'll then need to place the breach tiles in sequential order and in the orientation shown on the player board. The rules will then tell you how to populate the turn order deck, but suffice to say the players will have roughly 2 goes for every Nemesis's 1 go, and it will also show you how to populate the Nemesis deck dependent on the number of players. To finish, you'll need to populate the marketplace with 9 cards, and in the first game you play, these are the ones that are suggested. So at the start of every turn you're going to draw the top card of the shuffled turn order deck, and you'll see here that player 1's going to get the first turn. Now each player turn is broken down into 3 phases, first of which is the casting phase, which is where you'll cast spells like this Buried Light card. However, you can't do that until you've prepped that spell into a breach on a previous turn. So on turn 1 we'll skip the casting phase and move straight onto the main phase. And this is where the bulk of your work is going to be done. So you can resolve these following actions in any order and as many times as you want. You can play a gem or relic card from your hand, like this crystal card here, each of which will gain you 1 ether. Now ether is the currency in Aeon's End, so that will allow you to spend that many ether to gain cards from the marketplace, and you'll see the cost in ether is in the top right hand corner of each of these cards. You can gain a charge, and you can do that from cards like this Mage's Talisman. If you play this from your hand, then you gain 1 charge and place a charge token in the bottom of your character board. Now when those charge spaces are filled, you can then use the ultimate ability on that character, and you won't be able to do that again until those charge tokens are fully recharged. You can focus a breach. Now each player only starts with 1 open breach, and that's where you can guarantee you're able to cast a spell from. However, there is a focus cost on each of the other breaches. So let's just say you want to focus this breach here. You'll have to pay the focus cost in ether in the inner ring on the topmost space. And here, if you pay 4 ether, you can then focus that breach, rotating the tile 90° clockwise. Instead of focusing a breach, you can open one, and that will cost you more the less that you progressed in focusing a breach. So here it would cost 4 ether to open, but over here it would cost 9 ether to open straight away. Now that's a shortcut to opening a breach, but the cost can be quite prohibitive. Now this is important because you can only prep spells, and that's also done in the main phase, on either an open breach or a breach that you focused on this turn. Now remember, you prep spells in order to cast them on future turns, but you can only hold on to, i.e. not cast the spell in the casting phase of future turns, if it's on an open breach. If you happen to have prepped a spell on a breach that's only focused but not opened, you will have to cast that on your next turn. The player turn finishes with the draw phase. Now any card that you've gained from the marketplace or cast as a spell is immediately discarded. However, the last things you do on your turn are to discard any cards you've played from your hand, and you can do that in any order you want. And then you draw 5 cards from the top of the draw deck. However, if the draw deck is empty, this is where discarding cards in an order that you so desire is relevant, because you're going to flip the discard pile face down so that you then roughly know what cards you're going to be drawing on future turns. Sooner or later you're going to draw the Nemesis card from the turn order deck, and this is where they get to get their own back. So each Nemesis turn is broken down into two phases, starting with the main phase. Now this is where from oldest to nearest you're going to resolve the effects of each minion and power card the Nemesis has in play. So for illustrative purposes here, we've drawn a minion card, this Haze Spewer, and a power card, the Eye of Nothing. Now minion cards generally have a persistent effect, and if they were placed on previous turns, that's when that effect will take place, and also a health total in the right hand side, and you as characters will need to do that much damage before you defeat that minion. Now power cards invariably place power tokens equal to the number adjacent on there, and one of those is removed each main phase of the Nemesis turn, and once the last one of those is removed, its ability will then take place. So here you'll unleash twice. Now unleash is a keyword you'll see in a number of Nemesis cards because each Nemesis will have its own unleash ability. So as soon as the unleash resolves, you'll follow the instructions on the Nemesis board. The Nemesis then has its draw phase, and this is where you'll draw the top card of the Nemesis deck and resolve it. That can be one of three types. An attack card like this Unrelenting Eye will resolve immediately, and you'll follow the text on the card accordingly. And also a power or a minion card that we've already discussed. These will be placed by the Nemesis board to be used on a future turn. However, some will have an immediate effect that will be clear on the text of the card. Now at some point, one of your characters may have its life total reduced to 0, and at that point that character becomes exhausted, and you'll then follow the instructions that I'll show on a graphic on screen right now. Now play proceeds like this where you draw in turn order cards. Anytime this deck is depleted, you'll shuffle it and start drawing again. And remember, each Nemesis will have its own particular set of attributes. So for example, Rageborn here has its own separate strike deck that may be referred to, and you'll need to be ensured that you follow all of the rules on the Nemesis card when you're setting up the game and when you're playing throughout. So that's how this game plays. What did I think of it? So who is this game for? Well, it's certainly a medium weight game, but that shouldn't detract from those looking for an introduction to deck builders. It would just mean that there's going to be a slightly steeper learning curve for you. Really, this is also a game that's puts a calling card out to those with many deck builders in their collection, and is showing a bit of leg, almost saying, look at me. I'm a little bit different, but I do things just as good as those other chumps, so come get me. So you might want to consider this if you liked Sentinels of the Multiverse, published by Greater Than Games, because that has a similar us versus the boss cooperative type theme. Or Thunderstone Quest, published by AEG, because there are certainly some similarities there, and you can play that game both competitively and now cooperatively as well. So in terms of gameplay, well, this is one that's got a hell of a lot going for it. The no shuffling aspect almost seems so obvious, but from my perspective, it adds a perfect balance of randomness and skill to the game. Now, it's almost like the holy grail finding that balance, and this is almost as close as you're going to get. And that's not to say that it makes the game predictable. All you're doing is giving yourself a better chance of having a complementary hand. And what it does compared to most traditional deck builders is it removes the randomness from the character side and transposes them more onto the enemy side. And it's going to be the Nemesis that's going to spring up the most randomness and the most unfortunate events. So that helps with strategizing in a deck building game, and I can't say enough positive things about that element. Complementing that is the variable player power. Each character not only has a different starting hand, but has its background powers that you're able to use, and you'll find over time that different mages complement each other in different ways. Again, that's a player choice and it enriches the whole experience. The same can be said of the Nemesis. They each really do feel like they have their own identity. The way you populate their deck, the way they have their own special abilities really does make for a nice challenge. This isn't an easy game by any stretch of the imagination, but when you do fail, you also come away feeling like, you know what, if I'd have just done this slightly differently, I may have had a more rewarding and ultimately a winning experience. Now, have they got the breaches perfectly balanced? I'm not so sure, but there's a distinct possibility that I feel so dirty, gushing and being so complimentary about the gameplay here that might just be an ultra nitpick. Breaches work perfect thematically. You understand how they're there and how you're combating the nameless through them. So really, overall gameplay is an absolute thumbs up. So in terms of the look and feel and theme of the game, well, production quality hits some really high highs and some not so greats. The highs would include the card stock and the very clear text that can be found on them, and the art style perfectly complements the theme and tone that they're going for. Now, the not so greats would include the player and nemesis boards that suffer a little bit of warping, and the less said about the internal storage in the box, the better. Now, there's very little theme in the rulebook, but I'm pleased to say that the gameplay does provide for a highly thematic experience. Now, a little note on value and replayability, because this is a game that does offer excellent value for money, but I would have liked to see them redress the balance because there's a plethora of choice in terms of character cards and only 4 nemesis that come with the core product. So maybe they could have taken away a couple of characters and added 1 or 2 nemesis. But with all that being said, Dice vs Cards are going to give a final score to this spectacular game of 9 out of 10. Now, this is a deck builder that's not without its flaws, but if you're new to the genre or you're an experienced player, there's absolutely going to be a rewarding experience for you here. However, that's it from me. I'll see you next time.